Biotechnology has changed what is possible in medicine. It has helped turn once fatal diseases into manageable conditions and opened the door to treatments that would have seemed impossible a generation ago. But what happens when science keeps advancing while public trust begins to break down? Today on the Russo Edge, we look at biotech at a critical moment. The innovation is real and the promise for patients is enormous, but the system that supports it, from research institutions and capital markets to public confidence, is under pressure. If biotech is one of America's most important strategic assets, what must we do now to protect it and rebuild trust? Welcome to the Russo Edge. I'm your host, Solomon Wilcots, and today we're joined by Dr. Jeremy Levin, co-founder and executive chairman of Ovid Therapeutics, former CEO of Teva, former chair of Bio, and a longtime biopharma leader whose career has included senior roles at Bristol Myers Squibb and Novartis. Jeremy's own story began far from the boardroom. His family were refugees, and his life was changed by people who saw potential in him and took a chance. That experience helped shape how he thinks about science, purpose, and responsibility. His new book, Biotech in the Balance, Saving a Strategic Industry in an Age of Distrust. It makes the case that biotech's future depends not only on scientific progress, but on public trust, patient focus, and a renewed commitment to the people the industry serves. Jeremy, welcome to the Russo Edge. It's great to have you. How you doing today?
Solomon, great pleasure being with you today. Thank you for having me.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm excited about today's conversation. Let's go ahead and get started. And before we get to the book, I want to start with the person behind it. Your life began with upheaval, but it was also shaped by people who took a chance on you and they saw something special in you. Now, how did that shape the leader that you have become?
That is such a such a question, Solomon. I think there are a couple of things that one should draw from one's histories. One is that teachers are a remarkable influence on you. And because I couldn't read, I had the great benefit of meeting somebody called Mrs. Capel, who took the time to sit down with me and understand that it wasn't that wasn't reading. I was just more interested in what was going on in the bush. I could track, I could wrangle cattle and sheep, and reading just wasn't up there. But she taught me something. She taught me that if you look beyond the surface, you'll see something else. The second was Stuart Hampshire. Stuart Hampshire at Oxford, I met by complete chance. Stuart was the head of Wadham College. He knew I had terrible grades at high school. My grades were 2Cs and 2Ds. And yet, Stuart listened to me as a person. He asked me what I was interested in. And this extraordinary philosopher took an interest in trying to bring what was inside me out. I've never forgotten that. Those two people exemplify what I think we all should do as leaders. It's not about their success. They were leaders in their own particular world. It's about how you bring out what's best in everybody else. How do you make them win? How do you open doors so that they can walk through?
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't walk through, but if they do, then you should be there to support them.
Yeah. I think it's amazing how they saw the curiosity that you had, which you and I both know is the key to learning. You had that innately, and they were able to spark it and kindle it. And it's great that they saw what was special lying inside of you. And you trained as a physician and as a scientist. So, when did you first see biotech as far more than medicine and as a way to build something even bigger for patients?
This was quite a revelation. I had every expectation that my life would probably end up as either a game ranger in the center of Africa, and then once that didn't happen, then I was going to be a scientist looking at the thermodynamics of DNA. And then one day I met a patient was xeroderma pigmentosa. And I asked the question, could I find a way to try and cure this patient? Was there something there? I never answered it at that time. But going to Cambridge and leaving behind the pure science that was the delight that I had at Oxford,
Yeah.
I entered a world where, in fact, biotech came to me.
Mm.
I was asked to look at a new medicine. It was at the time a revolutionary medicine. It was a medicine derived from a snake venom,
Mm.
never before seen. And this was to become captopril. And I wrote a thesis on it. And I became not captopril, captivated. I
Yeah.
became captivated with the concept that you could take a natural product, you could change it, you could test it, and turn
Yeah.
it into something that hit a very specific mechanism in a human. And I determined at that time, at that moment, that I had to see what this entire world of biotech was in the United States. And so it wasn't one thing, it was several things. And each one layered in a choice. I made those choices.
It sounds like all of my favorite teachers that I've had in life, both in and outside the classroom. So I want to ask you this, the science in biotech has never been more powerful. So what breakthroughs give you the most hope right now?
Wow, that is such an extraordinary question. I am beside myself at times in wonder
Yeah.
as to what we're seeing being laid out in front of us, Solomon. Imagine a world where it was just remarkable that you had an antibiotic that just cured you like that of an infection. Well, that's not so long ago. That was really in the end of the Second World War. Penicillin burst onto the scene.
Yeah.
Now you fast forward to today. What do we have? We have cancers being knocked back really great. We have
Mhm.
chronic diseases that otherwise were killers, HIV,
Yeah.
an unimaginable disorder, but now can be completely constrained. These are, in and of themselves, they represent a huge advance in humankind's care. And then you have only to think about what would have happened without the vaccines that Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, and others delivered at the
Mhm.
time of COVID. All, let me be clear, all built on the back of biotechnology.
Right.
Millions would have died had they not occurred. But that was just the door opener.
Yeah.
Because what we see today, most recently, an extraordinary event in cancer. The, this is very exciting, a horribly debilitating, awful cancer, pancreatic cancer. Looks like we're en route to knocking it back. We're getting 60% cure rates. This is extraordinary,
Wow.
extraordinary, never before seen. And that's all because we're building on science.
And Dr. Levin, that brings us to your new book, Biotech in the Balance, Saving a Strategic Industry in an Age of Distrust. Why was this book needed to be written right now at this present time?
Solomon, against the backdrop of that remarkable tidal wave of innovation, America's never been stronger in that regard. We saw something else creeping in and beginning to erode the very foundations of biotech. And it became imperative for me because those things will destroy this industry from
Mhm.
within if we don't put a stop to it. And what I mean by that is we've seen that the inception of the disassembly of the very foundations of science that
Yes.
we had, the reduction in the NIH. We have the first introduction of politicizing science, saying that grants can't be given unless somebody agrees with a particular political stance. This is
Mhm.
not an acceptable way to build the base. Going on from that, we have begun to see what were, I thought initially, very necessary changes at the FDA, but executed in a fashion which was extraordinary. Over a period of 2, 3 weeks,
Mhm.
20% of the FDA simply tossed out. In
Wow.
addition to which, 90% of all of the deeply experienced and committed individuals who'd been there for years as leaders, gone within 18 months. Then you look at something else, and that is the change in leadership, the change in direction. This institution, built over many years, shapes the thinking not of the United States, but of the world as to
Yes.
how you develop drugs.
Mhm.
So my view was very constrained by what I was seeing here in the United States. And that was the fundamental erosion of the pillars of what had allowed biotech to thrive. And by the way, I want to draw a clear distinction. Biotech is about innovation. Once you've innovated, you need some degree of predictability, i.e., developing through the FDA, so
Yeah.
that investors can support it, because biotech ultimately depends on enormous amounts of capital pouring
Mhm.
in. That's not the same as the pharmaceutical industry. They've never raised capital at all, except debt, but that's not relevant.
Yes.
So we need to divorce them. This is why it was called biotech in the balance. It is not pharma in the balance, it is
Yeah.
biotech
Biotech.
in the
Yeah.
balance. That innovation engine is at severe risk in this country.
There you go. Yeah. And you've also warned that biotech innovators are often blamed for drug pricing. So, how do you explain the difference between creating a medicine and the system that determines what patients will actually pay for that medicine?
Solomon, we have created one of the most complex systems in the world for pricing. However, we do have something pretty fundamental. We have patent expiry. When patents expire, there is no defense for trying to build thickets to defend that drug.
Yeah.
So, my view on pricing is very straightforward. Pricing needs to reflect the extraordinary investment that goes into developing a drug. And in this instance, I'm talking about the small, innovative companies.
Yeah.
When that pricing is awarded, it means that the investors are encouraged to do another investment. When the patents are over, the price of that drug needs to plummet, as it should do, as it becomes generic. Now, unfortunately, around this system, we've conflated many different things. We've conflated the fact that large companies selling billions of dollars every year of their product, frankly, are small, the same as the small companies. They're not. They never have to raise capital, as I said before. So, pricing for a large company is a very different discussion than pricing for a small company that won't see its drug priced for 10 years at all, if ever, if it's not successful. So, I think what we need to acknowledge here is something very fundamental. The system we've built does not distinguish between the giants
Hmm.
and the innovators. The giants are incredibly necessary, but the innovators are what are driving it. And they
That's right.
produce 70% of the drugs. So now we come to a different layer of complexity. We have this strange duality: giants with
Yeah.
no need to raise capital, little innovators who need capital. You then have something different, and that is the middleman. In our complex system, we have allowed something quite disgraceful to intervene, and that is the PBMs. These are layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of middlemen who take a piece of the action, and a drug that is exits a factory at one price can easily find itself doubled by the time it gets to a patient by virtue of these middlemen.
Yeah. Well, that's a great explanation. We want to thank you for your candor. I want to know, why should Americans or and think about biotech the way that we think about, say, energy or even defense or semiconductors? And what should we do now to protect its edge?
Well, we have a choice. We have invested in what is, many cases, almost an invisible engine of innovation. People only see it when they go to the pharmacy. So if you ask the average person, what does biotechnology mean? They won't largely be able to tell you.
Yeah.
That story needs to be told. That story needs to be brought right the way out. We shouldn't simply have to rely on adverts talking about a drug and then immediately covering their concerns about the side effects and
Yeah.
lawsuits. Rather, we should be asking the giants, these giant companies, to broadcast the wonder of these drugs generally.
Yes. Yes.
There is an opportunity for communicating in a way that is quite remarkable. Selling a drug through, and here in New Zealand, through direct to consumer
Yeah.
is probably necessary, but it's not necessarily desirable. What you really want is to say, what are we trying to accomplish? Now, when people understand that, then that silent innovation engine becomes obvious.
Yes.
It becomes a pillar for health, it becomes a pillar for social cohesion, and a pillar for the economy. It becomes something just as important as any one of the fundamental industries in this country that are supported by large groups of people. And the reason why? It does something that the other industries doesn't do. It saves lives.
That's
It
right.
builds economy. It means that your child with leukemia will live, won't die.
Yeah.
This represents not just economic benefit, not just social benefit, but a moral benefit about the country, something that we should all recognize as having immense strategic national value.
Oh, that's really a great explanation. I want you to talk real quickly about your 10 commitments to biotech and why was it important to make this practical and not just a warning. Give us just an overview of what those 10 commitments are and why they are so very important.
In 1947, J&J wrote the Credo, 4 paragraphs. It was the birth of what we know as the modern pharmaceutical industry. But those 4 paragraphs underpinned an enormous truth. It was the commitment of that company to do good. Now, what we see is a different moment. Our industry is far more sophisticated than it was then. We have many, many more stakeholders than we did then. We have a much more complex economy. So I wrote out 10 commitments, inspired in fact by the J&J Credo, to modernize what it is that makes a new company in this giantly, extraordinarily important industry. What is it that are the legs, the framework whereby they can operate? Because after all, we've seen what the Credo has done. The
Yeah.
Credo walked America through the Tylenol crisis. The Credo helped me, for example, when I walked through a similar crisis in France. It helped me provide a moral base for
Yeah.
decision making. And that is what the 10 commitments are. This is how do we behave?
Yeah.
How do we lead? What do we build? Why do we build it? And what do we expect out of it? So they are actually quite aspirational. If we accomplish a few of them, then I feel we've done well.
Well, I love the analogy, the 10 commitments to the 10 commandments. It is a basis for how to operate in a safe and ethical way. I want to just get maybe some specifics. At least let's talk about maybe the first commitment, right? We will defend facts and independent science, which I absolutely love. Tell us more about it and why was it important to have it as the number one of the 10 commitments?
I witnessed, and it's very easy to read about this, what happens when science is overlaid by myth, by politics, by the failure to do the scientific mechanism, the scientific method. Because that method is what lies at the heart of biotechnology. right at its heart. If you do not have a scientific method, then you do not have an industry.
Yeah.
Now, an example of what happens when this is completely undermined was Lysenko in the Soviet Union, who permeated the entire agricultural environment, scientific environment, with complete falsehoods, much like we've seen recently
Yeah.
with the vaccines, the myths, the completely false publications of papers that are spurious and then take years to be retracted.
That's right.
If we do not rely on hard facts, evidence, reproducibility, and intellectual honesty, even when conclusions are inconvenient, and let me repeat that, even when the conclusions are inconvenient, we have no basis for building an industry. And any nation that relies on that does not defend scientific truth is retreating to the horrors of what Lysenko delivered for the Soviet Union. Millions suffered,
Yep.
and is guaranteeing at the next epidemic that we will have something terrible happen. It won't be that, as we saw with COVID, we were able to stop it. Yes,
Right.
we suffered 1.3 million deaths. But if we'd not had scientific truth and evidence, the likelihood is we could have suffered up to 20 or 30 million dead.
Wow.
Is that what we want? I
No.
don't think so.
No. 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 I thought the biotech community, it was phenomenal. The speed and the accuracy in which the response came. But that's what the community can do, right? When we get smart people, we get the capital, and smart people come together, lives are saved. So I want to wrap it all up with one final question. How should biotech CEOs think about speaking up when science, patients, or public trust are at stake?
Solomon, every single one of us needs to make a decision. That decision is, are we willing to stand aside and simply indulge in the richesse of this industry? Or are we better than that?
Yeah.
Are we the kind of people that our children want to look at with respect? Will the child look at a second tennis court, or will they want to know that their parent has actually stood for what is right and has made a difference? That choice is everybody's individually. I can't tell them what to do, and everybody will have their own views of how to express it. But another automobile, another flight to somewhere else, another holiday somewhere. What is that when weighed against the fact that you're standing tall, you're standing moral, and you are saying what is right, and you're demonstrating what others need to hear? Because that's how the world moves forward. Not by another holiday, not by another tennis court, not by another game in a very expensive golf club.
There you
You
go.
move that, and in your world, you move that ball forward and you take the chance by demonstrating that you're bold and you're brave.
Well, we want to thank you. That was absolutely marvelous. Dr. Jeremy Levin reminds us that biotech does not run on science alone. It depends on confidence in science, the people doing the work, and that new discoveries are being developed with patience in mind. His message is not that America has already lost its edge, it's that leadership in biotechnology has to be earned through courage, truth, and a willingness to build for the long term.